It's a new week in the aviation industry and time to crack on with the latest aviation news updates, all in a condensed recap form for you. Today there's coverage on the Airbus A380's future at Lufthansa, a cooperation between two airlines that is coming under some pretty hefty fire, Boeing 737s being parked, and Delta announcing a pretty big expansion to its worldwide operations. Beginning though with Qantas and China Eastern. Maybe you'd think a bit of an unlikely combination, but their plans to cooperate on passenger services and also freighter ones through to 2024 are at a significant level of threat. This follows the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, or as I like to think now one of the most talked about companies, planning to deny the authorization needed for the two airlines to go ahead. The ACCC has been hot on the back of the Australian flag carrier as it continues to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Alongside the China Eastern cooperation, the ACCC alleges that Qantas sold cancelled flights and did not inform customers for a prolonged period. Suppose Qantas and China Eastern's plans were to move ahead though. In that case, the ACCC cites an increase in prices as being the number one incentive for both companies, which would not improve customers' experience and hence why they are now intervening in a move to block this. Whenever an Australian company proposes a change, collaboration, or something else, it is closely inspected by the watchdog and more to ensure that it is fair to Australians and won't have any adverse effects on competition and consumers. This deal per ACCC would likely have more cons than positives and is therefore an immediate red flag. Such a collaborative effort from the two carriers is making headlines now because the reauthorization for this mini-alliance, if you will, is set to take place over the coming months and does follow an interim authorization being issued only in March of this year so that the two major carriers could try and figure out a way for this cooperation to go ahead. Now the big day is slowly approaching and they're receiving a lot of pushback on their passenger and freighter plans. Moving along to Lufthansa, Aero.de has reported that Lufthansa will introduce a new business class for its Airbus A380s, as it intends to retain the plane for longer than initially expected. Lufthansa, you may recall, grounded the A380 like many airlines around the globe during the height of the pandemic. They did go as far as selling units, and we saw critical people within the leadership of the airline highlighting the lack of place for the aircraft within the future fleet. While these comments were bold and strong, it wasn't hard to see where they were coming from, given the current status of the industry at the time. However, as the airline has battled with delays for inbound plane types intended to replace the A380s and more, it has been forced to retain the world's largest passenger plane. As part of methods to mitigate the impact of not having next-generation aircraft arriving on time, this is such as your A350s, 777Xs, and so forth, the airline will deploy the A380 in many more cities than initially expected, and by 2025 have all 8 current A380s that are to its name reactivated and regularly flying. A new business class slated to be installed on the plane is a substantial investment, but what also I think a fantastic indication of how long the airline will retain the Airbus A380. Typically, an airline won't look to invest in a plane that it sees no long-term future with, as these are costly, while the A380 won't fly for another 2 decades. Even if it remains active through to say 2030, the investment in the product should only aid Lufthansa in competing with other airlines in the same space, which is no doubt going to be one of their main goals. The 380 has been labelled as a comeback kid. This is thanks to its recent resurgence in usage across the industry. Many airlines, as you know, were questioning the plane during the height of the pandemic. However, now it has proven to be a pretty reliable solution to the increases in demand seen at major hubs around the world. And pair that with delays in acquiring next-generation wide-bodies, well, it's become a go-to again. Lufthansa, though, does join the likes of Etihad Airways and Qatar Airways that have returned the aircraft to service following initial resistance to do so. Moving along to the next topic of today, and that covers Delta routes. They've announced part of their upcoming summer 2024 network with new and returning services. Delta will look to boost its offering from Atlanta to cities within the United States. It'll add daily services to Fresno and Santa Barbara in California. However, the airline's plans don't just stop there, with resumptions to Burbank and Oakland. Following this latest announcement for the summer 2024 season, definitely a main center point has been put on the western part of the United States, which Delta believes can do with certainly an amount of strengthening. The primary US carrier has also said it will fly to Reno in Nevada and grow its operations to Aspen in Colorado. Lastly, we'll see the launch of a brand new service from Dallas to Seattle, which will emerge just in time for the summer season of next year. Salt Lake City and Detroit will also see additional flying resumption in the summer 2024. Overall, some pretty big changes to their network. Even though the summer of 2023 has technically just ended, it is pivotal for airlines to already be planning for the years ahead. And given the release of schedules being so far in advance, loading these services in is also something that's required. Delta says a substantial number of routes announced will be operated by its mainline fleet. These will include 737s, A220s, A321neos, and all the way up to its 757-200s. And lastly, from July 8th of 2024, increases from Atlanta to Colorado Springs, El Paso, and Sacramento will move towards multi-daily. On to the last topic of today, and that's Australian airline Virgin Australia, which has been forced to ground 2 of its Boeing 737-800s following troubles with the aircraft. The airline's findings relate to aircraft potentially fitted with falsely documented parts to the engine, therefore a substantial safety concern for the major company. Bloomberg reports that Virgin Australia only became aware of the possible issues following falsified certification documents from AOG Technics, a key supplier in Britain servicing. The part in question is currently being removed on VHYFR, which has become the second aircraft Virgin Australia has been made aware of that's been affected. These replacements are taking place in Brisbane, Australia, with the city remaining a very crucial location for the airline, which offers services right around Australia. It is worth noting that since its major restructuring and filing for administration, Virgin Australia has relied heavily on the 737 to power its network. This problem is stretching further than the 737s, but it is not something that's necessarily new, with other customers being affected and CFM International launching legal action against AOG Technics after 68 engines were reportedly uncovered to have falsely certified documents. One of the main inconsistencies highlighted through recent reports is concerns over the age of the parts being installed. AOG's documentation has not lined up with CFM's claims, saying that the parts have been clearly used that are being installed. That's going to conclude today's aviation news recap. Any thoughts, and you can let me know down below in the comments. I do greatly appreciate your support. Stay tuned for much more coverage on our industry in the next week.
And we'll fly.